Hey guys, and welcome back to another 2024 presidential election prediction. Today I have former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and incumbent Senator Susan Collins of Maine versus former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and former Governor of Illinois Rod Blagojevich. Now you may be confused about why Michael Flynn is in the Democratic column. He is a registered Democrat, interestingly enough, even though he served in the Trump cabinet. And Blagojevich had his sentence formally commuted by President Trump last year after he was initially convicted in 2008, I believe, for various corruption charges, including trying to sell the Senate seat that was vacated by then-President-elect Barack Obama. And on the Republican side, we have two very moderate Republican women here, Condoleezza Rice and Susan Collins. I don't think either of them officially endorsed Trump in either of his election bids. I know for a fact that Susan Collins wrote in then-Speaker Paul Ryan's name on her ballot in 2016. But without further ado, let's get into this. This will be a hard one because I'm going to say lean margins for Washington and Oregon for the Republican Party of all things, just because of, Michael Flynn. It'll be publicized how Michael Flynn was banned from Twitter not too long ago in the wake of January 6th and the insurrection and Blagojevich's corruption, whereas Rice and Collins don't have these problems and are sort of distanced from the mainstream GOP. I think California, by a tilt margin, will hang on Democratic Party just because of how strong it is for the Democrats. And I think... didn't mean to do that. And I think that'll be the case in New York, too, and Connecticut. But New Jersey is going to flip by a tilt margin to the GOP. Now, this is the first election since 1988 where New York and New Jersey have voted for different candidates when President H.W. Bush carried the state of New Jersey by about 6-point margin, I believe, something like that. But New York and Connecticut are more strongly Democratic than New Jersey, a fact that I think is reasonably little known. I think that Massachusetts, for the same reason, well, I guess tilt D, probably more like lean D, maybe for New York too. And Connecticut, I think maybe actually tilt D, because I think it's slightly less strongly Democratic than New York. I'm going to change California actually too now that I mention it. These videos are very much non-scripted. I think that Vermont, we'll see. Vermont actually may go into the GOP column. And one of the reasons I believe this is because despite it being a very strong Democratic state, they have a very liberal Republican governor in Phil Scott, at the time I'm making this video, who voted for President Biden in the 2020 election. Prides himself on fiscal conservatism and social liberalism, being pro-choice, much like Rice and Collins, I believe. New Hampshire is a true toss-up, very hard. I say it goes to Rice by a stronger margin, just because of there being more actual Republican voters here and anti-Michael Flynn sentiment among many moderate Democrats. The Rust Belt is pretty hard, but I think they actually, by tilt margins, go to Michael Flynn and Blagojevich. Trump made a lot of gains in this area. He won all 3 states in 2016, a big reason why he won to begin with. More traditional Democrats that may be fooled, for lack of a better word, by the party affiliations here. Michael Flynn and Blagojevich both being Trump-supporting Democrats. I think most of the safe Republican states will probably remain, simply because, conservative Democrats don't really have too much of an influence here anymore. I mean, yes, Louisiana has John Bel Edwards, a Democratic governor, and Kentucky Andy Beshear, another Democratic governor. But other than that, this region doesn't have a very strong Democratic influence and is very pro-Trump, and probably wouldn't vote for Michael Flynn just because of the D next to his name. I think liberal voters in these other states would be a little more flexible, at least in my opinion. Texas, I think, will be hard. Texas is George Bush's home state. I don't think that's really going to matter. I think it's going to be more competitive, just because of the gains Democrats made in the state. And I think Arizona and Georgia will be competitive too. Democrats made gains in the state, a little crossover support on both sides. This just seems about right. Hawaii will be reasonably competitive too. It'll go to the Flynn ticket by a little. The toss-up states are pretty hard. Florida, Trump may actually push for Michael Flynn here, and Ron DeSantis too, so that's going to be lean blue. Nevada will be lean blue as always, because why not? Alaska with its usual boring about 10-point margin, a little crossover support here and there. Minnesota, I just can't see it leaving the Democratic column for the first time in over 50 years at this point. It will have been 52 years since the state last went to a Republican. I think that streak will keep going. South Carolina, safe. Actually, maybe more likely. North Carolina may go to Flynn by a tilt margin just because it traditionally supports Republicans, and Trump may push for him, which will tilt the vote a little. Virginia, I actually think will go, tilt, as will Colorado and New Mexico, to the Rice Collins ticket. A little more liberalism on illegal immigration when compared to the Democratic candidates. George W. Bush was the last Republican to carry all three of these states. Obama won them both times, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, so this is an interesting shift. Oh boy, Missouri goes blue for the first time since 96. Once again, this used to be a bellwether competitive state. It really isn't anymore. It's gone to the Republican column, but some here may view Michael Flynn as more of a traditional conservative. Nebraska, I think, will side all of it with the GOP. Even District 2, just because, Trump will push for him hard, and urban areas are very much resistant to Trump. Ohio will and Iowa will actually remain in the, lean Republican column. Enough Democratic voters and enough Republican voters that will side with Michael Flynn. No, wait a minute. No. Sorry. What was I thinking? Condoleezza Rice hold on to these solid 8-9 point margins of victory. Maybe, huge losses. There'll be enough. That's what I meant to say. Enough Flynn traditional Democrats and Flynn voters from the other side to make these states rather competitive. But Condoleezza Rice will hang on, considering the considerable gains that GOP made here over the past couple of years. Lean Republican for Illinois, they'll remember Blagojevich's corruption and vote against him as a result. Iowa, maybe lean to the Democrats. Won for the first time by them since 2008. DC is safe Democratic because it always is. And lean D for Maryland and Delaware. And for Maine, lean D all throughout. Susan Collins' home state, that will help. And oh boy, we have kind of a mess here. Rice and Collins win. Republicans taking back the White House. Condoleezza Rice becomes president. Interestingly enough, former President George W. Bush, the person whose administration she served in, said that rather than voting for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden, he actually wrote her name onto his ballot. So that's interesting. So Bush will have gotten his wish for president. Susan Collins becomes vice president, the second woman vice president, second consecutive vice president to be a woman. While, Michael Flynn and Rob Blagojevich lose. And that's one of my videos.